It's almost a new country. Politically, economically, it has grown beyond belief. It's considered a difficult market. The way of life is different, spending patterns are different. Even though from the consumer point of view, I think this is a market waiting to be tapped.
An awful lot of foreign companies have come over here, and what they've tried to do is instill their philosophy without thinking about what Spain's about. What culture, what society, what history. If you come over with the idea that you know best and they should do it your way, then I don't think you get anywhere.
I think you have to go native as quickly as you can and accept that it's different. But that doesn't mean to say that it's any better or any worse. You have to have very clear what your objectives are and be very pragmatic about achieving your objectives. It's about winning, not about being right.
Spain is a people place, so really you've got to be out there, you've got to be talking to people, you've got to have a personal relationship with someone before anything happens. And that can be a bit frustrating when you arrive. You think, I work for a more or less prestigious publication, why aren't people answering my phone calls? It's quite simply because they don't know you. There needs to be a sense of personal trust established before you can get anything done. Spain is a tribal society. People want you to be on their side, they want you to be their friend, to be loyal to them. And when I first arrived, it took me several cups of coffee for my bank manager to do anything for me, and then he was doing all sorts of things that sort of amazed me. And that, it can be a bit frustrating when you arrive. It's very different to the English way of doing things.
In a good relationship, both sides have to make an effort. British design consultancy Addison worked on the initial stages of the branding for Spain's first high-speed rail link, the AVE. In order to compete with Spanish rivals when the design project came up for tender, Addison had to demonstrate a long-term commitment to both the Spanish market and to the client, Spain's national railway company, Renfe. So how did they do it? Wayne Roseman, Managing Director.
We were very persistent. We kept on being there, coming back. We became part of the family. So much so that in one of the negotiations that we had with the classical purchasing department, hard, tough man, he said, Wayne, you can't even start to ask us that, because you know we can't accept that. You know, so it is familia. You know, you're one of the family. You can't present that to us. Present it to us in a different way.
But valuable though it was to become part of the family, it still wasn't enough. To win the contract, they had to go one step further.
We said, okay, we'll set up a Spanish SA, not a subsidiary of the UK company, but a fully fledged Spanish company with both British and Spanish directors, and demonstrate commitment to the marketplace and to the client. And I think very often the companies have got to move out of what I often describe as the sticky-fingered exporter, who just wants to go in and take it away. You have to show commitment. If you don't show commitment, you will get one job, and then after that, you become superfluous.
One of the major differences with Spanish clients is in the type of brief which they provide for a job. Wayne has found that this too changes the dynamic of the client-supplier relationship.
In general, you will not get as detailed a brief as you would get in the UK. You won't get the wad of research along with the analysis of the research, along with we feel that we should be moving down this route because, which is at times difficult. But what it means is that you have to know and understand your client a lot better. And I think what you have to try and do is to build a client relationship as opposed to a project-based relationship.
Neil Templeton is Marketing Director of global telecoms company Flag Telecom. Today he's in Madrid at a trade fair. He's based in London but often comes to Spain to support colleagues on bids and deals. He too has had to get to grips with their more personal approach to business.
In Spain, they have a much more flexible approach to negotiations, communications. Their perception of time is different. In the UK and particularly the US, we try and close the deal as quickly as possible. In Spain, it's built on trust and relationships. You have to spend a long time with them before they'll actually sign the deal, and that obviously means going out for long lunches and long dinners. But it means that you do build up a friendship, a social friendship as well as a business friendship.
Adolfo Castilla is president of Flag Telecom España. What differences has he noticed between the Spanish and British ways of doing business?
We learn all the time how British people work in formal terms. They are definitively more formal than we are Spanish doing business, in the sense that they pay a lot of attention to good planning, scheduling, to reach all the goals, and that is good for us, that we are a bit more anarchic in that sense. We relied much more in, let's say, personal relationships, creativity all the time, new ideas, and and the combination of that, provided that are good professionals in both sides and nice people in both sides, is always positive.
British and Spanish working styles also seem to complement one another at design consultancy Addison.
We describe ourselves as a company of British roots. I mean, our origins as a company are clearly British. However, the majority of people that work in this company are Spanish. The combination of British and Spanishness is quite interesting because, on the one hand, you get the sort of the rigor that you would, and the process that you would get in a British side of things, and then combined with, let's say, the flair and the improvisation that you get in the Spanish. And these two issues, particularly in our business, play off against each other.
Teresa Martín is a designer at Addison.
Los ingleses son muy organizados, a lo mejor nosotros no somos tan organizados, entonces ellos nos aportan esa parte de organización y nuestra manera de trabajar es una manera de trabajar más cercana y más humana y nosotros le aportamos esa humanidad. Pues eso también hace más agradable el trabajo, ¿sabes? Tener con tus compañeros, jefes, clientes, ¿sabes? Si tienes un trato más cercano, pues el día a día es más agradable. Entonces, creo que es una buena mezcla.
If it's vital for colleagues within a company to get on well, how much more so for a freelancer in Spain? For them, a good relationship with their clients is the key to survival. Graphic designer Lucinda Morrissey has lived in Spain since 1991. She's found her Britishness a distinct advantage when it comes to getting work.
Muy bien.
¿Sí?
¿Has tenido tiempo de hacerlo todo?
Sí, yo creo que sí. There aren't that many design companies that use freelancers. So a lot of my work is actually with direct clients. To secure work here is not that difficult. It's not that difficult to make contacts here. Cold calling is quite easy. I use the fact that I'm British. I'm seen as punctual, I'm seen as respected, and I think I'm sort of trusted, and I've got a lot of experience.
Despite her experience, Lucinda is always open to local ideas and influences.
What's very important being a foreigner is to listen to the client. You can't come over as a British person and start doing business as you would in London. I think you'd meet a lot of resistance. Whereas you come over with that experience and then take in what is actually happening locally, I think you can be very successful.
In Britain, the professional distance between business people means it's easier to discuss things like money without feeling awkward. Getting down to the nitty-gritty in Spain is more difficult, as the line between professional and personal relationships is often blurred.
Talking money with clients is very, very difficult. They just don't like to talk money. In England, there's something very refreshing about the fact that you talk about a budget, you establish certain parameters. If they're ever broken, you then talk about it again. In Spain, that's incredibly difficult. And you can very easily ruin a very good relationship over something quite foolish.
And this tendency to avoid talking money means that more work is done on trust. Situations which would seem unnecessarily risky to most British business people are quite the norm in Spain.
Very often, in a Spanish situation, you have to do a little bit more than you would normally do in the UK, and you probably have to start work before the contract is completely signed, before the ink is dry. There is a great deal that is done on trust. That has its downside, but in our 12 plus years of operating in the marketplace, we have only had to write off the debt on one client. Besides that, we've always been paid the amount of money that we had agreed. Now, it might have taken us a long time to get paid, but we've always been paid.
For any firm to secure business here, it's essential to know who the decision makers are in the traditional Spanish company. Unlike Britain, this power is concentrated at the top of an organisation, making the Spanish boss a more formidable figure than their British counterpart.
Spain has had a history of strongman leaders, and there's still at times, I think, a slightly unhealthy attitude of kowtowing to powerful people, being very concerned about, rather more concerned about people's titles. There's less of what I sometimes think of as faux informality. You know, your boss is always your boss, and even if you're dressing down on a Friday and all wearing polo shirts, he can fire you. You're probably more aware of that here than you would be in a Northern European country.
Teresa, can we just have a look at this study, the ARIS study?
Neil Balfour works as a creative director for design consultancy Addison.
The hierarchy within a company like Addison or within a British company is probably less evident on a day-to-day basis than a traditional Spanish company or other Spanish companies in which I've had experience, where the boss is the boss is always the boss, even though somebody might know better than the boss. Spanish companies tend to look for somebody who's more responsible than everybody else, and everybody expects them to solve the problems.
Well, Spanish companies are quite hierarchical. However, in terms of our business, if you know what you're doing, there are ways of getting around that, i.e. you get everyone else to give an opinion first, and then you get the boss to give the opinion. Because if the boss gives the opinion, people tend not to want to contradict the boss's view.
Making sure to ask the boss's opinion last is just one of the tricks to handling meetings. New arrivals should also note that the average meeting in Spain is a less disciplined affair than it is in Britain.
Meetings, that can be a bane of everyone's life in Spain. Because you get the meetings within the meetings. You can have 2 and 3 and 4 meetings all going on at the same time, and everyone speaking at once. And completely undisciplined, and it is frustrating.
Spanish people have an incredible facility to, or I assume they have the incredible facility to listen to 5 conversations at once, which is something that you can find confusing, irritating, disorientating, and which doesn't normally happen within the UK.
I think it would be unfair to say that the Spanish had a short attention span, but they do have the ability to do a number of things at the same time, whereas the British tend to be able to concentrate very much on one thing, go from A to Z. I think you won't get in most Spanish companies someone going from A to Z, or to go, to take the next step.
And this is because of what?
One order. The British/Germanic process way is much more efficient, but it's a damn sight more boring.
As well as a less systematic approach to work, there's more of an emphasis here on enjoying your business dealings, which is why it's so important to have a good line in small talk.
Small talk is very easy because it's international, it's football. It's part of that getting to know you. It's part of, I value you as a person, and that's why we're doing business, but we're not just here for a cold financial or work transaction.
Football is the icebreaker in the Spanish meeting. As strange as it seems, everybody talks about football.
Sport's the obvious one. The international language is soccer, so that's definitely one that's on the agenda.
But come 2 o'clock, it's food that's top of everyone's agenda. Everything stops for lunch. William Gibbs has lived in Spain for 13 years. He's the band leader on Spain's top chat show Lo Más Plus. Every day, he and the other 6 band members take time out to have lunch together.
Food in Spain is incredibly important. And just the other day we were talking in the band about how we've achieved a greater cohesion since we've been going out and eating every day. And I think that hour and a half within the band, and also throughout the whole of Spain, at 2 o'clock, is a really important moment of the day when people stop talking about work and sort of get together and have a laugh and a glass of wine.
Since the band formed nearly 4 years ago, they've become a great success. But Will feels they've still got some way to go when it comes to pulling together as a team.
Each one of us got a different kind of musical background. We kind of complement each other. But I have to say, we're not always the greatest exponents of the virtues of teamwork. I think Spain, teamwork doesn't necessarily come naturally. And certainly the Spanish themselves recognise the fact that their football team, their national football team, never sort of does anything worth talking about, although as individuals they've got some great players, and they tend to triumph more in terms of tennis or golf, which is individual sports.
Teamwork isn't Spain's only Achilles heel. There's also the small matter of its reputation for poor timekeeping.
The Spanish attitude towards time is an interesting one, because obviously there's the cliche of relaxed timekeeping, and there's some truth in that. The idea of punctuality is sort of, some people are good at it, but for instance in the band, timekeeping is a problem.
I think the main frustrations for people coming to Spain, and they're ones that will wear off after you get used to being here, but I think it's inefficiency. It's a different attitude to time. Things don't always happen quite when they're supposed to. One can't help but flare up and get angry at that, and there's no point.
As band leader, it can be a bit exasperating when people turn up late, which is pretty much part of the course. But you just have to learn to take a deep breath and realise that the kind of Spanish improvisational skills will mean that at the end of the day the band will be rehearsed for the live show, which goes out at 3:30, even if it means a kind of last minute dash. I think in English, we're always thinking about tomorrow and organising things and projecting and planning, which is important if you're in a position of responsibility. But I think probably it takes 5 years off your life. So I would advocate the Spanish approach to enjoying the moment, being with people and sorting out what happens tomorrow.
Well, Spaniards' attitude to forward planning is just different. I mean, they consider forward planning to be a timescale much closer to the event than we would in England. It makes people around them panic because they think, will this event happen? And the answer to that is, yes, it will, and it will happen very well, but don't try and get it to happen too far in advance.
So perhaps the trick to being successful in the Spanish business world is understanding the Spaniard's perspective on work. How does it compare to life's other priorities?
It's clear that Spanish people have other important things in their lives, which sometimes British people tend to forget. And we're all very focused on our work. We're all going as fast as we can and trying to be super efficient. Spanish people have got a little bit of a wider perspective, and sometimes that can be frustrating if you've still got the British perspective of I'm here to work all day.
En España el trabajo está concebido como una parte más de la vida, no es el foco de tu vida, no es el único foco de tu vida, por lo menos, ¿no? O sea, en España tenemos más consciencia de que la familia es importante, de que tus amigos son importantes, de que tu tiempo libre es importante, bueno, todas esas cosas, y que tu trabajo también es importante, pero es importante en la misma medida que el resto de las cosas.
I think people here see work as a means to live, as a way of having enough money to exist, and that really the things start to get interesting when you come back from work. And I think that's very much reflected in the way that people don't immediately ask you what you do. And it seems a bit of a weird question if you're in a party or in a pub, you sort of say, what do you do? It's a kind of, it's kind of slightly irrelevant.
I think there's often this idea that Spaniards don't work hard, that they're lazy, they're fun-loving and not industrious, in contrast to the Anglo-Saxon world. And I don't think that's true. It's just simply a different way of working.
To the average Spaniard, to say that you might spend an hour and a half getting to work, they would think you were crazy. And I think they're right. And I think I know they're right. And so the balance of we work very hard and very concentrated between 9 and 5 or 6 because I've got to get the train, which if I'm lucky leaves at, doesn't really exist here. And so therefore it's much easier to have a more balanced work and home life.
It's vital to understand the emphasis placed on home and family in Spain, but this isn't the only sensitive area to be aware of.
The family is terribly important in Spain, and I think any sign of disrespect towards family would really be considered an enormous faux pas. And generally, be careful with criticism. Spaniards are very sensitive, they like to please. You need to couch your criticisms in very gentle terms. Also remember that the sense of humour is very different. So what might be considered a witty aside in Britain is an extremely sarcastic and rather rude comment here, because humour here is sitting around in a group, a formal joke, and then you laugh at the punchline.
You have to be sensitive in that way, not to sort of put your foot in it, because you can offend Spanish people. But I think if you get someone to laugh, basically, you're 3/4 of the way there. Qualities which I disliked in Spain are probably excessive ambition, or people who are kind of arrive in Spain thinking this is going to be easy, I'm going to make it. I think they like a bit of humility, and a bit of respect for what's going on and for the Spanish way of doing things.
So what's the best way to prepare for doing business Spanish style?
Relax. Be prepared for surprises. Don't expect to start your meeting at 5 o'clock on the dot, and because you put in your Palm Pilot that the meeting will last half an hour. That it will. It won't. But that's not a problem, or shouldn't be a problem.
Come out here, relax, give it time, work on those personal relationships. It won't happen instantly, it won't happen overnight, but you'll find that you will enjoy it, that it is worthwhile, and that for every ounce of humanity and of yourself you put into it, every bit of personal relationship you're willing to establish, you will be rewarded 100-fold.
Uno, tocando.